Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Um, just before we get going here on the module, which is module 32, we're gonna finish module 32 on language today. Um, I just wanted to let you know that I did not put up a quiz on Friday on Edmodo. Um, my intention was to not. My intention was to open up that assignment so that you could hand in your dream log, your first dream interpretation using any theory you wish. You could use a theory out of the book, or you can use the theory that you developed by looking online. Didn't matter to me. And look at the manifest content and then sort of analyze why you had the dream. And then hand that in to me. And of course, unfortunately, I forgot to open the assignment, but I did it on Sunday. So hopefully today you'll get a chance to get that done and get that in. If you've already typed it up and you handed it in on class on Friday, that's great. Just like I said before, go in and say, I handed this in class, and submit that, and I'll know that my paper is there. In fact, I have it here in my bag. So I'm not going to give an assignment at the end of this module. I am going to post this module, and I'm going to post a video for you to watch. But what I want you to do, if you would be so kind, is to make sure that you've got that dream submitted today. And then I can get that marked sometime this evening and get it back and get it out to you on your progress reports, which hopefully will be Wednesday, although I suspect after this it may be moved to Thursday, but still, we need to get that done. Without further ado, let's finish module 32. Okay. If you remember, we were talking about language. This module is on language, and we were talking about how there was a critical period where children acquire a tremendous amount of language. There's a lot of theories as to how we acquire it and why we acquire it, whether it's just operant conditioning or whether we have some kind of an inborn language acquisition device like Noam Chomsky would have told us. One of the things that we know is that language and our thinking intertwine. And as they intertwine, usually we often judge people by their intelligence anyway, by their ability to relate it in language. Now, that may not necessarily be the right way to do so, but when we are thinking and we're attempting to communicate our ideas, language is that expression. And when I say language, I'm not just talking about words. There's gestures and all kinds of things, facial expressions. But that language is our ability to communicate our thinking and to communicate our culture. We know that language can affect our thinking. And yesterday, right at the end, or not yesterday, but Friday, right at the end of class, we were talking about that group of people that don't speak in the past tense. And they don't readily think about the past tense, and in fact they have no past tense in their language. It's very interesting. This is referred to as linguistic determinism. It was proposed by Worf in '56. If you're curious about this, there's a wonderful documentary on it, and I've seen it. It's in its entirety on YouTube, and by all means go take a look at it. It's very interesting. We also know that our languages influences our thinking. We tend to provide a lot of words for what we use. And the reason is because it determines, our thoughts more clearly. And so, if you look at this, series of colors here, I would be terrible at this. But if we were to sort of, go from green to blue, and I say, what do you think that color is? And and some people would say, well, that might be turquoise, and that might be navy, and that I wouldn't even begin to attempt there. But when we apply words to concepts and ideas, it allows us to relate to them more easily, rather than saying, well, it's kind of bluey green. Well, if we say one is turquoise and one is whatever, then it allows us to think about it in a definitive way. And so we look at cultures who apply more words to one kind of concept. It's often because they're working with that. If we think, the word snow, and we look at, First Nations people who live in the high north, very well often will apply many different words to snow because it's something that they work with on a daily basis. And so therefore they would have many more ways to express the condition of the snow or the formation of the snow. Similarly, other groups of people who would work with winds or sands or storms would have a very different way that they would relate to those words. We know that when people increase their word power, it pays dividends. It's what we call the bilingual advantage. When children learn two languages, they learn to inhibit one language and bring out the other, backwards and forwards. And we do, in fact, see that their ability linguistically improves, that, in fact, the presence of the two languages actually adds to their linguistic abilities in general. When we were speaking in class, I asked, did you ever talk to yourself when you're thinking? And most of us, raise our hands. We talk to ourselves not verbally out loud, but we may talk to ourselves internally. That's because a large degree of our thinking is language-based. We do think in images as well. So, for instance, if you're gonna turn on a tap, you don't think about, okay, I have to reach over and grab the tap and turn it to the right or turn it to the left. You just simply do it. We have an image, a process by which we do that. Riding a bicycle, you don't have to verbalize exactly, if you're going off balance this way, you're going off balance that way. If you go faster, you'll have more force to keep yourself upright, blah, blah, blah. We just intuitively know that. But when we're looking about novel, new, effortful thinking, we often verbalize it. If we imagine doing something, whether it's figure skating and you're learning a new jump, and a lot of coaches will tell you, I want you to visualize you doing this at home, even when you're not on the ice. When we do that, we actually see that different parts of our brain light up as though we were actually performing the activity. If we looked at an fMRI, if it was possible, of a figure skater doing a particular difficult jump, and then we did it again with them imagining that difficult jump, we'd actually see the same parts of the brain light up. And so when we're expressing ourselves linguistically or physically, we're actually rehearsing that which we know how to do. And so therefore, not only can thinking affect our language, but language can affect our thinking backwards and forwards. And so even discussing what it is we're going to do and how we're going to do it, or envisioning it, which is a form of a language, we are in fact changing our ability to do it. One of the biggest debates that we have about language is, do animals have language? And so here's, classic example of a honeybee. Honeybee finds a stalk of pollen or nectar, flies back to the hive, and then begins a very intricate dance. And the direction of the dance, whether it breaks to the left or to the right, shows what direction to the other bees that are following the dance. Outside the hive, they need to fly toward or to the left or to the right of the sun. The vigorousness of their wiggles shows the other bees how far away the flowers are, the new source of nectar is, and there is a communication. And there's no question, because these bees, which are now sort of listening to this dance, if you will then go out and find that source of nectar from the dance given by the bee. Now, there's no verbalization, but there most definitely is a communication. And the question becomes, is that language? Most of us have probably heard parrots talk. We know that's a form of mimicry, but is it language? In order to have language, we believe that we need to have some sort of a cognitive skill going on. In other words, some form of thinking, some form of, as opposed to just simply parroting. And we know that in humans and other primates, we do see the ideas of concept formation and insight and problem solving and the communication of culture. I'll give you some examples here. This is a famous old experiment. Here is Sultan, and he has a stick, and he actually has to manipulate it, put one inside the other in order to manipulate, I think it's a banana, I forget exactly, and to get this thing close enough to him where he can actually grab a hold of it. And so at some point in time, clearly he's undergoing insight. He's doing some internal thinking, internal dialogue of some type, and coming up with, aha, this is how I solve this problem. And so clearly, in that case with Sultan, there's a reinforcement. There's some operant conditioning. If I do it this way, I'm going to get rewarded with food. This is another ape here, and this ape has taken a small stick and is putting it into a tree, and then termites are biting onto it, and then pulling it out and getting the termites, and then licking the stick and putting it back in, allowing the termites to grab it and pulling it back out, and repeating the process. And so, very much like us, here's the reward, these great big juicy termites that I like to eat, and I'm going through this, but there's an internal dialogue of some kind or another going on within this ape that says, if I do this, I'm going to get rewarded in some way. We also know that many creatures have an internal, a communication of culture. Here we see a dolphin using a sponge as a foraging tool. Here we see one ape basically demonstrating to a smaller ape how to use a stone to break open nuts, hard nuts. And so there is a communication here. The question is it language? And there's no question, I mean, if one cat jumps in a window and makes an excited noise and there's another cat nearby and the cat in the window makes all kinds of squirrely, excited noises, my heavens, there's birds at the bird feeder, and another cat hears that and jumps up to join the first cat in the window to look, there's no question that there's a communication. But, is it, oh wow, there's a robin in the feeder and I think there's going to be another one that's going to join it, you should pop up here and see this? Or is the second cat just simply cueing on the fact that the first cat is excited? So clearly the first cat is communicating, but is it a language? We know that many of our fellow animals do respond to communication. You take something like a border collie, highly intelligent dogs, they can often respond. This one in particular has over 200 word vocabulary, around, stay, down, but is that language? We also have taught many primates to communicate through sign language, and I'm going to put a video up, and I want you to look at it, be ready to answer this question tomorrow. Hopefully we're together. And it's going to be, do you think that apes have the ability to communicate with language? And that word language is kind of a bugaboo. That's really where we're going to get stuck. There's no question that they can communicate, but is it a language? I'm going to put up Washo or Kanze. There's a couple of fantastic videos where we get a chance to see these primates communicate with a language that we have taught to them. Animals like us also communicate through gestures, moving hands, facial expression, grunts, and so we clearly see that there are verbal communications that if a particular ape makes a particular vocalization, that the other apes can interpret that as excited or angry or frustrated, but yet to the degree of communicating what they're frustrated about, that's where the debate really goes. The idea is did we and did our language evolve from these rudiments of this, and because of our cognitive abilities, did we require something that was in fact more intuitive, where we have to string together concepts and ideas that are more elaborate, and therefore our need for language is greater than the need for language for many of the other species that we see at very primary levels of communication. So basic ideas here. Apes acquire their limited vocabularies with a great deal of difficulty, unlike children who develop vocabularies at amazing rates. And so when we look at the people who have taught these apes to communicate, it's painstaking. Definitely at the end of our exam, I'm going to show you a video where you'll actually see the amount of labor it takes to get these guys to communicate. Chimpanzees can make sign to receive a reward, just as a pigeon can peck a key and get a reward. But clearly, the pigeons haven't learned a language; they are simply responding to their environment operantly. Chimpanzees can use signs meaningful, but lack a human syntax. If I say to you, if you go to the store and pick up a bar of soap, at this store you can get it cheaper than that store. and I just changed the wording around. I went to this store to get a bar of soap because it was cheaper than the first store I went to. Just by changing the syntax of those words around, I've communicated something that's intricately quite different. It communicates the same idea, but I've, just by the alteration of the words and the way I've strung them together, it means something just a little different. And so we have a tremendous syntax with the words that when we change the order and the conditions, it can communicate a completely different concept. If we presented with ambiguous information, people tend to see what they want to see, their perceptual set we were talking about earlier. And so if you are working with a dog, you say, my dog knows exactly what I want it to know when I want it to know. That's a perceptual set. And if you're someone who believes that animals do communicate with language, then you're going to see a lot in their actions that maybe someone else might not see. In this case here, this is showing an ape, a chimp, being taught the sign for baby and being able to communicate it. No question, we can do that. Again, I'll show you a video of that. In this case here, I'm not sure if this is, yeah, this is Kanzi. This is a pygmy chimpanzee can develop greater vocabularies, perhaps semantic nuances in the learning of a language. Kanzi developed hundreds of words with these little lexicons, these little symbols that was able to point out and discuss what was needed for them to get along. She would communicate ideas, but they were very rudimentary ideas, and not really the type of syntax that you and I would be used to. A lot of people who criticize this say that Kanzi was simply a victim of extensive operant conditioning, and was communicating, for the purposes of socialization, and communicating only for the purposes of getting rewards, food and such. And of course, this is a quote from Steve Pinker. If we say that animals can use meaningful sequences of signs to communicate a capability for language, our understanding would be naive. And of course, his conclusion: chimps do not develop language. So you can see there's two sides to the fence. I don't want to color it one way or the other for you. I'm going to show you a couple of clips up on YouTube right now, and I'll get you to draw your own conclusions, and I want you to share them with everybody tomorrow in class. All right, see you then. Bye-bye.